It's Tuesday, July the 7th, 2020, and welcome to the reading of the Record Courier. My name is Pam, and let's begin today's reading with the area deaths. Ralph H. Kane, 78 years of age, passed away Friday, July 3rd. Visitation will be Wednesday, July 8th at the Green Family Funeral Home and Crematory Service in Manawa from 5 to 7 p.m. Social distancing guidelines and the wearing of masks will be required. Please pay your respects to the family by kindly passing through the receiving line and exiting. Funeral services for Mr. Kane will then begin at 7 p.m. Charles B. Sherman, also known as Chuck, 92 years of age, of Ravenna, passed away Sunday at his home. Funeral services will be announced, but the Shorts Spicer Crisplet Funeral Home in Ravenna Chapel. Esther Casper, 88 years of age, passed away Sunday, July the 5th. Arrangements are pending at the Green Family Funeral Home and Crematory Service in Manawa. Virginia Marie Bretthauer, 96, of Worcester, went to be with her Lord Sunday, July 5th, at Avenue at Worcester. The family thanks the personnel at Avenue of Worcester and Ohio's Hospice Life Care for their care of Virginia and Robert's Funeral Home for their assistance during our time of sadness. Well, that concludes the Tuesday area death notices. Now, for our first article. With fireworks displays canceled, Portage County citizens take matters into their own hands, by Eileen McClory. With so many fireworks displays canceled on the 4th of July, some brought the fireworks displays to their own backyards. However, while it is legal in Ohio to possess fireworks, it is not legal to set them off. Local law enforcement said they responded to multiple reports of fireworks over the weekend. Lieutenant Mike Lewis of the Kent Police Department said the department had 21 calls for fireworks being set off so far in July, with 11 of those reported between 9 p.m. on July 4th through 1:30 a.m. on July 5th. In June, the department had 8 calls for fireworks, he said. Lewis said fireworks calls can end up being a low priority on a busy night like July 4th. Officers are responding to drunken driving, domestic violence calls, and other immediate threats, and fireworks fall to the bottom of the list. As you can imagine, on the 4th of July, we got a lot of calls for fireworks on top of everything else. It's a very busy night, Lewis said. When officers are able to go investigate, he said, they try to approach the house in a way that lets them see if the person is actually setting off fireworks, similar to a noise ordinance at a house party. Lieutenant Patricia Wayne of the Streetsboro Police Department said that the police department had responded to several reports of fireworks being set off in the city over the weekend. The people who are setting them off were given warnings, she said. It is a violation of our city ordinance to set off fireworks in the city, Chief Darwin Powers of the Streetsboro Police Department said in a statement on Facebook last week. If our department receives a complaint of fireworks, we will respond. If the caller gives us a specific address, we will go to that address and speak to the homeowner. If we just have a general area, we will go to that area to see if we can see the fireworks being set off. Usually, we will give a warning on the first time out, but can issue a citation after that. Julie L. Heckman, Executive Director of the American Pyrotechnics Association, a trade group based out of Maryland, said fireworks sales were up so high in 2020 compared to other years that some fireworks retailers closed early on the July 4th holiday because they were out of inventory. That hasn't happened before, she said. Consumer fireworks revenue in 2019 was about $1 billion, but 2020 significantly surpassed that figure, she said. While most cities canceled their fireworks displays and their July 4th celebrations, others changed their plans for smaller celebrations. Streetsboro, Macedonia, and Akron all had socially distanced fireworks displays. Portage County Sheriff David Doak said he thinks the amount of fireworks going off this year was exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. I think what would have contributed to it is you can't go somewhere to watch fireworks, he said. Well, this next article is titled, Documents Fabricated in a Portage County Jail Abuse Allegations, Prosecutors Say. by the staff reporter. The Portage County Prosecutor's Office said they have reviewed an investigation into allegations of abuse and mistreatment from 23 former Portage County Jail inmates, and with one exception. The allegations were found to be false, according to a press release from the Portage County Prosecutor's Office. The investigations were conducted by the Portage County Sheriff's Office, the Lake County Sheriff's Office, and the FBI. Lake County was asked to investigate by Portage County Sheriff and the Buckeye State Sheriff's Association. The prosecutor's office said the investigations were extensive and thorough, involving hundreds of hours of interviews and obtaining and reviewing documents, jail phone calls, and jail security videotapes. With but one exception, none of the complaints were found to be based in fact and were found to be wholly fabricated or greatly exaggerated accounts of minor or unrelated incidences, the press release said. 8 of the complaints were prepared for the inmates by Mr. Brett McClafferty while he was incarcerated in state prison at the Lake Erie Correctional Facility with them while serving sentences there. Several of these inmates retracted false allegations when given the opportunity to read the affidavits prepared for them by Mr. McClafferty. In the sole incident found to have any merit, which occurred in November of 2013, the correction officer involved resigned rather than face disciplinary action by the sheriff. The investigation is continuing with the purpose of determining whether criminal charges are appropriate for those persons involved in making and filing false reports, making false statements to law enforcement officers, and fabricating false documents, the press release said. Moving on. Crestwood planning full return to school by Kristen Kano. The Crestwood School District is planning to have every student in school every day. Shortly after Governor Mike DeWine released the much-anticipated school reopening guidelines on Thursday, Crestwood Superintendent David Toth discussed the district's plan for daily in-person learning for every student with additional safety measures. The plans are fluid and are heavily guided by the American Academy of Pediatrics. We want everyone back in school. We think it's better, Toth said. School administrators are still refining their plans and will submit them to the Board of Education for approval at a special board meeting in mid-July. Once approved, the official plans will be released to the public. On Thursday, however, Toth gave the community an idea of what the upcoming school year will look like and asked for buy-in from parents, whom he called the first health care provider that sees a child every day. Toth asked parents to do daily health checks before students head to school and to keep them home if they have a fever. He also asked parents to immediately start getting their students used to wearing masks, washing their hands, and practicing other sanitary techniques. The state is recommending that students in 3rd grade and up wear masks. Start working with your kids on mask wearing now. Start procuring those masks if you don't have them already. Resources are tight, so we're asking you to get a school supply, Toth said. He also asked parents to start thinking about finding ways to get their children to school without buses, as the state has not yet provided guidelines on bus capacities. Parents will soon receive a survey that includes questions about transportation so that the transportation department has more information. Toth said students will have assigned seats on buses and masks may be required. Once students arrive at school, they will have a staggered entry and will see signs reminding them of social distancing and safe practices, as well as hand sanitizer at entrances through the hallways and at classroom doors. Staff will be wearing masks and/or face shields. Toth has found that classrooms can hold 23 kids while maintaining 6 feet of distance, and in addition, each desk will be outfitted with plexiglass dividers. Throughout the day, custodians will be repeatedly sanitizing restrooms and hallways, and teachers and aides will be expected to sanitize their own classrooms throughout the day. Administrators are still determining how lunches will work, and Toth said they may do staggered lunches or lunches in classrooms. There will also be staggered time between classes so that the hallways are not too overcrowded. Outside visitations will be significantly limited, he said. Every night, custodians will do a sanitation spray through every surface of the buildings. The staff has already been trained on all new policies, Toth said. He will be recommending to the board that the teachers return to school on August 31st for 5 days of professional development to go over the policies and develop remote learning skills in case of another breakout. He is recommending that students do not return until after Labor Day, September 8th. The additional safety measures like the masks, face shields, plexiglass, and sanitizer will be paid for using the $176,870 the district received in federal stimulus money through the CARES Act. Our next article, explosives training at Camp James A. Garfield this week. In Newton Falls, residents and business owners near Camp James A. Garfield Joint Military Training Center may notice the sounds of explosive blasts in the area this week. The Ohio Army National Guard's 812th Engineer Company will be using high explosives during scheduled training exercises Tuesday and Wednesday, July 7th and 8th, and the sound from the explosions may be heard farther away than usual. The training is an important part of military readiness, and the explosives are used to simulate battle conditions. Moving on. New sign denotes the historic South End of Kent by Caitlin McGarvey. On July 3rd, a sign that denotes the historic South End of the city of Kent was officially dedicated. The small ceremony took place last week and was attended by Kent Mayor Jerry Fiala as well as a handful of excited residents. The historic South End first gained its local historical designation in November 2019. A group of neighbors took on the project, locating 100-year-old documents relating to the area's multicultural community, the oldest in the city, back to the Marvin Kent Railroad era. The background of the sign shows a sepia-toned locomotive. In front of it are the silhouettes of many men, women, and children seemingly dressed in historic accessories and garments. In front of a row of vibrant, multicolored houses, it reads, Historic South End, First in Diversity, in white letters. Doria Daniels, a historic South End resident who helped spearhead the project, has lived in the area her whole life. In a packet she assembled, she described the history of the area and what it was like to grow up there. The historic South End can be found in the southwest boundaries of a map from 1865, she wrote. The land, in an area then known as Franklin Mills, was once owned by abolitionist John Brown. Inside those boundaries, Daniel wrote, is a small multicultural community of immigrants whose ethnic backgrounds and cultures merged over decades to become the historic South End of Kent. The ancestors of the historic South End residents come from a variety of cultures such as Italian, African American, German, Irish, and Polish. They migrated from the various regions to take advantage of the economic opportunities in Kent's booming railroad industry in the late 1800s. Our community is rich in history, and the contribution of its residents have enhanced not only this neighborhood, but also the general business community of Kent, and laid down important social and political foundations within Kent, Daniels wrote. Daniels provided some further insight into the history of the land. During the Civil War era in 1865, railroads and Parsons Lumber Company set up industrial complexes in the southwest Franklin Mills. Marvin Kent served at his father's bank as an officer, owned large segments of Franklin Mills, and was president of the Erie Railroad. Oral traditions suggest he set up temporary housing in rail box car shops for his workers. In 1865 to 1880, he also built the first homes that workers moved into. Based on oral histories from historic South End residents who are in the 90s, the flooring and walls in some houses were wood board used in boxcars. One even said that the garage of their home was made from boxcar wood. Daniels wrote, a group of architects in the city is documenting the historical designs of houses on Franklin Avenue, showing that many are over 100 years old. They were built from kits supplied by Parsons Lumber, which were similar to building kits from Sears Company during the same period. The historic South End's designation is recognized as local only. Community Development Director Bridget Cecil previously said, though that kind of designation will not necessarily generate funding that would come with a more formalized process, it does give the community a sense of ownership and pride. Previously, Daniels also said she hoped the designation encourages other historical neighborhoods to pursue a similar goal. The boundaries of the historical South End begin at Mogador Road and Summit Street and extend to Franklin Avenue and Cherry Street. This next article is titled Football, Waterloo to Return Home in 2020 by Jonah Rosenblum. Homecoming will have a different meaning for the Vikings this year. After condemned bleachers forced Waterloo to move its home football games to Marlington last season, the Vikings plan to return to their home field in 2020. That field will likely be surrounded by limited bleacher space, as Waterloo's new stands aren't expected to be ready until 2021, according to Athletic Director Mike Davies. As the Volunteers tore down the old bleachers, a small separate segment of seating was found to still be usable. It'll be a little bit of a transition because it's going to be a bring your lawn chair to the game deal, Davies said. We do have some limited bleachers. Davies said the small stands that used to hold the visiting team's band have been moved over a bit to rest on the concrete slab that used to hold the main visiting bleachers. The school's baseball and softball bleachers have been placed next to the band bleachers to provide limited seating on the south side of the stadium. The south side, or visiting side, is on a small hill, allowing better viewing angles for those bringing their own chairs. Sure, the Vikings could have returned to the home of the Dukes for another year while their own stadium was completed, but the feeling was that their student athletes wanted to play on their own field. It does give our kids the opportunity to play at their home school, which is what the ultimate end goal is, Davies said. It just didn't feel right. Kids should be able to play and have a sense of home. And as gracious as Marlington was and as good as the facility was, it's not Waterloo. Davies said he did some digging around on portable bleachers to rent for the 2020 season, but his conclusion was that the Vikings would be lucky to break even, and that's assuming fans are allowed in the stands without restrictions, which is no sure thing given the coronavirus. It's just not cost effective, Davies said. If all adults sit in those seats, you'll about break even, and that's if you can fill them up. If the governor or the OHSAA comes out and says that there will be limiting attendances at games, then you're talking about taking a pretty big hit. And we're a district that we just can't gamble like that. So the Vikings will stick to a small amount of bleachers seatings along with a bring your own chair option for 2020. If I'm a fan, I'm going to try to get as high as possible in that south side of the stadium, Davies said. It's elevated a little bit, so your view is going to be much better. Now, if you want a ground's eye view, you'll be able to just probably sit in the corners on the north side, and it'd be a different perspective. While full bleachers will almost certainly not be ready for the 2020 season, a plan has been submitted by an architect to get full bleachers in time for the 2021 campaign. Davies said Waterloo is also looking into getting a track for community use as well as for the school's track and field teams, and even artificial turf, but those are long-term goals. For 2021, the plan is simply to install full bleachers, a concession stand, and restrooms at no expense to the taxpayers. We are in dire straits as a school system financially, and that's got to be priority one, Davies said. We're not going to burden the school system with our problems. We're going to try to find outside sources that make this thing work without using any resources from the school. Next up, Ohio elections boards must email or call absentee voters who don't provide identifying information, by Rick Ruin. Ohio election officials must email or call voters who haven't provided all the necessary information on absentee ballots for the general election in November, not just send them a notice in the mail. As the states prepare for a surge in voting by mail because of the COVID-19 pandemic, Ohio Secretary of State Frank LaRose issued a directive Monday outlining that and other steps that the local boards of election must take for the fall election. The Secretary of State's office will send absentee ballot applications to about 8 million registered voters in the state, and LaRose has said Ohio could see an unprecedented number of votes cast by mail. The state conducted its primary almost entirely through the mail after polls were shut down hours before they were set to open March 17th to prevent the virus from spreading. Instead, the primary ran through late April, with most voters required to cast absentee ballots. State lawmakers so far have preserved in-person voting, with LaRose's support, but lingering fears about spreading the coronavirus are expected to drive more Ohioans to cast absentee ballots. Traditionally, local boards of elections send a standard form in the mail to absentee voters who do not provide all of the required identification information during a cure period. But LaRose's directive instructs them to also use any email address or phone numbers in addition to the form to contact those voters and assure their ballots are counted. LaRose's Ready for November directive also requires the Board of Elections to have paper backups for electronic poll books that are used to check in voters casting in-person ballots on Election Day, and lays out how local boards should spend their portion of nearly $13 million in federal funding earmarked for elections administration. About 87% of that funding will be distributed to local boards of elections, according to LaRose's office. They are to use it to buy more equipment to help mail, process, and count absentee ballots, and to hire more staff members for the high turnout election. Federal money must be used to print materials about social distancing protocols and public communications about changing voting locations, voting options, and other information about the election. Funding also will be provided to purchase personal protective equipment for poll workers and voters, according to the press release. Ohio's 88 county boards of elections must file a plan for how they will spend their federal funding with the state by July 27th. Local board of elections are required under the directive to survey poll workers who have served in the past 3 years or intended to serve in the primary by August 1st as they marshal their forces for the general election. Poll worker shortages played into the decision to close the polls in the primary. Local boards of elections feared they could face the prospect of opening the polls without enough workers to staff voting locations. The directive also sets thresholds for local board of elections to print enough ballots to accommodate high voter turnout. LaRose said the state could see record turnout even under pandemic conditions. It is unacceptable for a board to run out of ballots for an election at any time during the absentee voting period or on election day, the directive reads. It is the Board of Elections, directors, and deputy directors' duty and responsibility to determine ballot quantities and machine allocations. Let's move on. Waterloo Board of Education to meet Thursday. The Waterloo Board of Education will hold its regular Board of Education meeting on Thursday, July 9th at 7 p.m. in the Andrew C. Herchick Media Center at 1464 Industry Road in Atwater. Kent State Sports Notes in baseball. Several former Kent State standouts are set to take part in various Major League Baseball training camps later this month. While preparing for the shortened 2020 season, teams can have up to 60 players take part in preseason training. Up to 30 players will be active once the season begins, while the remainder will make up a taxi squad that will play scrimmages throughout the regular season and can be called on to come up at any time. Former flashes on the initial 2020 MLB roster include pitcher Joey Murray and infielder Travis Shaw at Toronto, pitcher Andrew Chafin at Arizona, pitcher Eric Lauer at Milwaukee, and pitcher Taylor Williams at Seattle. Recent Kent State graduates Maria Segletti in softball and Tim Rooney wrestling have been awarded the 2020 Bob James Memorial Scholarship Award by the MAC Faculty Athletics Representatives. The $5,000 postgraduate scholarships are awarded in honor of Bob James, the second commissioner in MAC history, from 1964 to 1971. The awards went to members of the same MAC school for just the second time in history. Sigletti is the fifth Kent State female student athlete to win the award, while Rooney is the second Flashes male honoree. Maria and Tim are both highly deserving of this award, KSU Director of Athletics Joel Nielsen said. They embody the definition of a student athlete with their classroom accomplishments, championships, and helping others through community service. Sigletti graduated this spring with a perfect 4.0 grade point average, earning a degree in exercise science. She was a two-time All-MAC center field and has volunteered at the King Kennedy Community Center to assist in preparing peace baskets for families in need during the winter holiday season. Sigletti plans on attending physical therapy school at Ohio University. Rooney graduated this spring with a degree in exercise science, posting a career grade point average of 3.83. He captured the 2020 MAC title at 133 pounds and earned All-American honors from the National Wrestling Coaches Association. For his career, Rooney totaled 97 victories at the varsity level and was a two-time NCAA qualifier. He also spent 3 years as a representative on the Student Athlete Advisory Committee. Rooney is currently enrolled in Baldwin-Wallace University's Physical Assistant Program. Men's basketball. Michael Perini, a Massillon native and star guard at Kent State from 2010 to 2012, will serve as the general manager of the Mid-American Unity Squad that will compete at the basketball tournament starting this weekend. The $1 million winner-takes-all 5-on-5 event will run from July 4th to July 14th at Nationwide Arena in Columbus. Mid-American Conference. Ken Mather became a casualty of budget cuts caused by the coronavirus earlier this week, when the MAC Associate Commissioner for Media and Public Relations was informed that his position has been eliminated. Mather has spent the past 11 years working for the MAC and has been a consummate professional during every second that I've spent with him during that time. Well, moving on to Portage County crime reports. In Kent, Isaac Agamang, 23, of 1676 Eastland Court, number 375, was charged with trafficking in drugs, a fifth-degree felony, after allegedly selling marijuana on Haymaker Parkway at South DePeyster Street on Thursday. He was released on recognizance bonds. Alfonso Ciuchino, 33, of 707 Berkeley Street in Kent, was charged with trafficking in food stamps, a fifth-degree felony, after an incident on Wednesday on South DePeyster Street. A Findlay man was found asleep on a bunk bed at Fletcher Hall on Kent State University on Thursday and was charged with criminal trespass, a fourth-degree misdemeanor. He was released on a recognizance bond. Streetsboro. Larry Killings, 25, of 7202 Harvard Avenue in Cleveland, was charged with improper handling of a firearm in a motor vehicle, a fourth-degree felony, driving while intoxicated, a first-degree misdemeanor, driving under a suspended license, a first-degree misdemeanor, and failing to drive in marked lanes, a minor misdemeanor after an incident on June 28th. He allegedly had a loaded firearm and an assault rifle in his car while intoxicated. He has pleaded not guilty and was released on a recognizance bond. Kara Decker, 46, of 1062 Rocky Brook Drive in Akron, was charged with theft, a third-degree felony. Decker allegedly took a firearm from a Wellman Road trailer on June 27th. A warrant was issued. Well, that concludes the Record Courier for Tuesday, July 7th. My name is Pam, and I'm asking you to please stay safe until we are back with you again.